this QuestMed career tutorial, and we will be talking about whether deciles really matter. I'm going to try and leave a lot of time for questions, so I probably won't be speaking for that long compared to our usual QuestMed tutorials, so maybe try and wrap up within the next maybe 25-30 minutes if possible, but may run over a bit. So this is a lecture that I kind of wanted someone to give me maybe when I was a medical student and a foundation doctor, due to all the thoughts about deciles and foundation programs and careers and anxiety that I had. So I hope it's useful for you. We're QuestMeds. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, we have a question bank of 4,000 questions. In the next couple of months, we're adding another 1,500 to make it 5,500. So we're very excited. We're going to keep adding more over the next year. We have flashcards as well. We try and use questions that help diagnosis, make differentials, focus on investigations and management, as you can see, as you have seen from our SBA tutorials in the past. If you're at any university, you can contact us for university-specific discount codes, which we've been sharing for the past couple of months. And then I guess the most relevant thing for you guys, for those who are interested in sort of foundation applications, is that we're developing some PSA mock tests. That should come up in the next sort of month or two. We're just working on them as we speak. So hopefully that will be very useful for people. And also the app is coming up, and hopefully that will make it useful for people who are commuting and want to use it on the go. Here's a list of all the tutorials we've done. Next week, we're probably going to be doing psychiatry SBAs and SBAs in medical emergencies. On Friday, I'll be doing advanced rheumatology with SMILE. So hopefully that will be useful as well for you. And if you want to access all our tutorials, you can access via our Facebook group, and use this link to sign up to all our future tutorials. And we're going to tell you more about what our plan is going forward with regards to our tutorials. Hopefully we'll be making loads more. Cool. So back to the good stuff and why you're all here. Do deciles really matter? So what I want to cover today, so we're all on the same page, is for those who are still don't really know exactly what goes on in terms of foundation program applications. I'll try and keep it brief just to tell you the bit about why, how we apply, and the sort of structure of application in terms of the marks or the scoring that you would have. And really what I'm going to try and talk about the most is about some perceptions of foundation program training and what perhaps I thought was very important but maybe wasn't. And maybe a few case studies towards the end about my own cohort of friends and what happened to them, just to sort of allay your concerns. And just the long-term effect of deciles on your postgraduate applications, which is trying to make you think a bit longer term rather than just focus on the next year or two, which in the grand scheme of things isn't as important as you might think. So foundation program applications, so you finish your medical school and then you go on to do 2 years of foundation program training. And normally in your first year, you will do mainly medical or surgical jobs. And in your second year, you tend to do a community job of some sort or psychiatry. So usually people do GP, some people do community rehab, some people do community psych. So that's the sort of run through. And you tend to learn all the basic stuff about being a doctor, and I'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. So this is the timeline for next year, and the idea is that you have this, you have an eligibility application, and usually the medical school helps you sort that out, and generally the medical school guides you in terms of everything that you need, and you have certain time periods where you have to get things done. You also have the application for the academic foundation program, which sort of goes hand in hand, which we talked about in a different lecture. And then it sort of wraps itself up more or less usually around probably like March, April time, if I recall correctly, but I haven't put it on here. But basically, yeah, you sort of the point of this is just to say you start getting things rolling around October time is when your registration opens on Oriel, which is the program. And then afterwards, that's when you sort of essentially wait for ages until you get stuff sorted. So there are different foundation schools, so about 20 across the UK, and also you essentially apply to one of them, or you rank whichever ones you want, and then you get that one, and then once you get your foundation school, afterwards then you apply for each individual job, or which is usually sort of a set of jobs that is over a period of 2 years. You'll know technically where your hospital is over this period of 2 years. So this is the sort of key thing, which we'll talk about later. So deciles is, for those of you who don't know, it's 10 percentiles. So the top decile is top, 10th decile is the bottom, and then depending on that, you get different points. So 43 points, the maximum is 43, and then you get 7 additional educational achievements, which a lot of it tends to be related to degrees, and also the publications that you might have. So talk about that in a second. And also the situational judgment test, which is a judgment test where you sit down and you answer loads of questions about what you would do in certain situations based on GMC guidance. But again, this is for another lecture, and we'll talk about that in too much detail. And then the educational performance, again, out of 43, and then if you're in the 10th decile, you get 34 points. So you can see that it's quite wide, the differentiation between the first and the 10th decile. But equally, you also need to consider that the other score is out of 50 as well. So the SJT and the educational performance measure are equal in terms of, which is weird in the sense that you spend 6 years of medical school or 5 years of medical school learning, and yeah, it's all 50% of it is based on one exam, but that's I'll talk about that in a bit more detail. And the additional degree maximum of 5 points, and then the publication, which is maximum of 2 points, and then your publication needs to have a PubMed ID, and this can also be a letter to the editor for those who are looking for something a bit quicker that can be done in the next few months. Definitely would recommend it. And the scary one is the SJT. From my own experience, having not done very well in my SJT, I would recommend you don't pay for courses, because I think I went to like 3 courses and still did very badly. Not very badly, but sort of not as well as I would have liked compared to my peers. So yeah, don't be too scared. Don't fall into the scaremongering of courses and stuff. I don't know if that really has much of an effect on doing well in the SJT. PSA won't be going through this today. We're doing a separate session in the next 2 months. And the PSA questions as part of the bank. Keep up to date with our social media, and yeah, hopefully it'll be out very soon. So fingers crossed. But again, it has no effect on your scores going forward at the moment, as far as I know. It's just something you have to pass as part of the licensing for being a doctor in the UK. So you don't really need to do it, but it's kind of good to have an understanding of what it involves. Yeah, so as I said, you basically pick wherever you want in terms of the area, and then afterwards you pick the preference of the jobs going forward. So that's roughly how it works. Cool. And then, yeah, so you can amend your foundation school preference until February 18th, 2021. This is from the foundation program website, and then you rank all your foundation schools. And I think I found out my exact job around elective time, which I think was about April. So that gives you some time to plan your life for the next 2 years. It's very exciting. Cool. And then finally, the additional degrees, which is worth up to a maximum of 5 points. So you can see that if you do a BSc, you will either get between 1 and 4 points. I think most people would get 2.2 or 2.1. I think that's the sort of standard. So you get at least 2 or 3 points if you do a BSc, which is very, very good. And also if you get a first class, then you would get 4 points. So the BSc does have an important role on getting your foundation program applications. Research, we talked about research in our previous tutorial. Myself, Adam, and Stefan, we talked about how it got published. So hopefully it'll be useful for those of you who are a bit worried about publishing as medical students. So yeah, that's cool. So the real deal, do deciles really matter? So again, as I was saying earlier, I sort of made this presentation as a way of sort of thinking about my own progress as a medical student and as a doctor, and the anxieties I had when I was applying, and the disappointments perhaps that I had when I was going into clinical years and not doing as well as I would have liked. So I sort of, in my first 2 years of medical school, I actually did quite well, and perhaps less so in my clinical years. So I was very disappointed, very worried. I wanted to do something. I wanted to do a competitive specialty, so neurology at the time. So I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this because my decile rank is too low, blah, blah, blah. Am I going to be able to do this? And it sort of escalates in your head. So hopefully this will try and deal with a slightly complex topic, but something that people think about a lot, and therefore you're here. So you're interested in hearing about what I have to say. So I'm very glad. Just as a point, I think, although I'm going to talk about deciles, and perhaps I may not be talking about it very I will have some criticism of the decile structure, but actually at the same time, I do really think that for those of you who are striving for academic excellence, do that, and don't worry. It's so important for you, for society, and for representing your career as a doctor or representing other doctors, and that you should always try to aim for academic excellence if you can, and that's excellent. And it's something that you should be proud of as well. But I think a lot of people, myself included, when I was in medical school, really felt that maybe I didn't measure up to that, or maybe I wasn't doing as well as I should have, and deciles always let me down. And that's sort of the main target of this talk, as it were. And even those people who tend to do really, really well for long periods of time, they will have blips. And perhaps that's for you guys as well, for those of you who are, always do well and then don't do well, or you do really well throughout your life, and then suddenly in clinical medical school, you're not doing as well as you thought you might. So perhaps this is some way of also dealing with that idea. So when you have your decile after your exams, you sort of look at it and you're like, oh, okay, why did this happen? And you sort of just get this number, you're in third decile, fourth decile, fifth decile, sixth decile, and you're like, oh, okay, is this what I am? Is this all I have to show for all the time I have spent working in medical school? Is this the sum of my ambitions is to one number or two numbers? I really feel that is one of the problematic aspects of deciles. They do make you slightly more competitive with your peers and may sort of foster this competitive environment, because not everyone can do well, because statistically there has to be people who do worse than others, and you're also in this huge, really high achieving year group or university, and and actually being 10th decile is not bad in the group of people who are sort of academically speaking in the top however much in the country, or even in the UK or in the world. So I wouldn't worry about that too much in that sense. Well, it does sort of reduce your own achievements, because you think, oh, okay, all this time I've spent only for, and that's what I get. And it is frustrating. It can lead to you sort of this fear of missing out, and maybe you want to go to more academic stuff, and maybe you end up sort of neglecting your other work life stuff. And I think that is an issue. And also it exacerbates your anxieties, like myself, about my future career. I want to do something academic. Am I going to be able to do this if my decile rank isn't very good? And finally, this concept of imposter syndrome, where you're thinking, oh, I don't belong here. Oh, I'm not good enough. And perhaps when you don't get the result that you want, you may think, oh, I'm not good enough to be here. Is this the right thing for me? Should I leave? And those are the kind of thoughts. And these are all the thoughts, I think, to varying degrees, some people will have over the course of their medical school, particularly in clinical medical school career, when you're thinking about applications going forward. This is research I did in 2016 with one of my friends. We presented it in the Netherlands, and we found that loads of people attended out of hours teaching because they knew their peers were attending. And the other side of it was that 61% of students felt that they attended sessions in preference to extracurricular activities, such as sports or social events. And I think that's true for me. And there's always these cases where I felt that, I would want to maybe revise rather than go do this, whatever it is. And I felt at the time this was just representative of perhaps people are worried that they're not doing well enough in medical school, and therefore they don't sort of look at their work life, their life, and their work-life balance is a bit off. And that sort of moves on in medical school and in your foundation program going forward. So do make sure to look after your mental health and also your ability to socialize and do sports. So I think that's very, very important. So these are my numbers, which maybe a few years ago I would never have shared, but here I am now sharing what I did. In my first clinical year, I think I got fourth decile, and in my second clinical year it was third, and then I think overall it was the third decile towards the end that was counted towards my foundation program marks. And I got a BSc, which gave me 4 points, which is first class in neuroscience, and also I got one letter, which was very, very good. I was very happy that I got it in, and then that was an extra point. My SJT, compared to my colleagues, I actually did, I don't say, perhaps I didn't flop it, but I just didn't do very well compared to my friends. And those my friends were getting about 42, 43, maybe even more. And that was a sort of, and I did actually considerably lower than, loads of people I spoke to. So I did feel I didn't do so well on. And and the total was 83, and my top choice at the time was Northwest London, entry was 84. I got into North Central, but in North Central I got my top choice job, which I was very, very happy about. And then what I really wanted was something neurology related, and the only one really was stroke. And then I got FY1 in Stevenage, and then FY2 was at the Royal Free Hospital. So that is my sort of program in a nutshell, and what happened. And this is just a general sort of view. I think this was 2019, 2018, of the general sort of EPM scores at the moment. I really could not find any of the sort of cutoff scores at the moment for some of the London deaneries and outside of it. So for those of you who might ask, I really could not find it, but I can only remember the one from my year and the year after. So I would assume it's probably around the same, especially since North Central London has changed a bit to some of them. It's probably more competitive now because some of the hospitals have gone to the east of England, as far as I'm aware. I just put this up for reference. I'm sure you guys might have come across it, and it's on the foundation program website as well. So I was very unhappy that I missed my top choice job. The main reason was because I lived in Hammersmith in West London, and I have to move to Stevenage, which I was very disappointed about. And also, this is Ed Westwick. I met Ed Westwick in a pub in Stevenage, and I discovered that he was born in Hammersmith, but was raised in Stevenage. So that's a very exciting time when we met him in the pub in Stevenage. So it was very, very good. But really at the time I was so distraught. I mean, in the sense I had to move, I didn't really want to move so far, and I had my family and my friends in London, and I was, disappointed I had to move for a year. Obviously other people, as you'll see in some of the case studies below, were disappointed as well because they had to move as well. But really, actually, although I was unhappy at the time, and all I really, I was disappointed that I didn't get what I really wanted. I ended up going to the Royal Free, and I did stroke, and I got in touch with the team at UCLH, and I did loads of stuff as an F3. So really the point I'm trying to make is, perhaps this is just an example for my own sake in terms of, okay, I didn't get what I wanted, but actually the thing I got, the next best thing, was actually really good as well. It really doesn't matter where you go. And if you're smart, if you're enthusiastic, and you seek out all these opportunities that you have in front of you, you will do well. And that's sort of the general theme of the talk, is that don't worry if you end up somewhere that you don't want to go, you will end up being fine. And I'll talk about this in more detail. So there is this idea that if you don't get the decile that you wanted, or you miss the most competitive foundation school, there is some, it's not the end of the world, obviously, but also there is some benefit to a certain extent. So for example, for me, because I got into the less competitive foundation school at the time, I was able to get my top choice job in that foundation school. Whereas if I was in the bottom of the pile in the higher foundation school, I would probably not get the jobs that I wanted. So therefore, I would say that you have more flexibility choosing locations if you don't get into that top choice, but also you have more flexibility choosing individual jobs. And if that's important to you, you may more likely to work in an academic hospital. This was really important to me at the time, but not very important. I'll talk about that in a second. So that's the sort of rough thought process of if you don't get into exactly what you want, you may not it's not the end of the world, and there are benefits to it. Working in a teaching hospital, I thought was so important, and it's such a big thing, and it was the key thing I wanted to get out of going into foundation programs. The idea really is that you do get to be a part of well-funded care, and I put high quality in brackets because sometimes it depends on your department. Obviously some departments will be excellent and will be amazing, and you'll learn so much, but some departments are not so good, especially for training, but certainly well-funded in the sense that you're less likely to have stuff like rota gaps, or less likely to have less likely to be in a situation where you're not supported. However, the most important stuff is probably research and audit links, which again can be important in other hospitals. And then but not necessarily better facilities. And I think one thing that's really important is that you tend to be spoon-fed a lot, so you don't really get to be very independent for a very long time in a teaching hospital. So it does, in a certain extent, sort of delay you from taking autonomy and sort of trying to develop your own clinical skills to a certain extent. Whereas perhaps if you're in a district general hospital, you may have that autonomy, and that's important going forward for your postgraduate applications. When you DGH, really, I think I didn't want to work in a DGH because I had this perception that it was not good for training, but actually thinking about it, when you're working as a foundation doctor, the stuff that you do is the same as where you do it all over the country in every single hospital. You know, you're doing bloods, you're doing rectal examinations, you're writing prescriptions, you're on the ward round. It really doesn't matter. And there is probably an argument of saying that you may have your autonomy and develop your clinical skills, which can be important for your interviews going forward. And the same doctors who are rotating, the senior doctors who are rotating between district generals and teaching hospitals, especially the registrars, tend to be the same sort of doctors, and you can sort of learn off them and get audit and research stuff. And for me, when I was in Stevenage, I got in touch with the neurology department, did a taster week, spent loads of time with the consultants, did a really good audit. And no one else in the hospital was really interested, so it was all sort of for me. So that was a really good benefit for me, being in a district general hospital rather than a teaching hospital. So the next step is, do you need to get a job in your foundation program to get into some specialties? And the answer is no. So you don't need to do like a specific job in neurology if you want to do neurology, for example, or everything else. In medical training, you'll probably do it during medicine. In other specialties, you probably won't expect to do that in a specialty, that particular job. So for example, things like dermatology, things like ophthalmology. But it's sort of good to do it if you can, but it's not necessary. And there is always a role for doing an F3, taking some time out, building up your CV, developing some clinical experience. So that is helpful. It's good to do stuff like that, but it's not necessary. That's the point I thought it's important to make. And the other thing is that it doesn't really matter where you do your foundation program. And I used to think that, you know, as an extension, you know, okay, what about the audit stuff? What about the research stuff I wanted to do? You know, it doesn't really matter. You can keep links with certain departments wherever you are in the country. And even if you end up somewhere that's a bit farther away, you will be fine. You'll make links with whoever you need to make links with. And when you are going forward in your career, no one cares where you did it. So if you don't get the foundation program that you want, you know, it will be fine. And you can always go back and do it wherever you want in the world, in the UK. But location obviously may be important to you to be closer to your family. I think there are certain instances where if you have kids or if you have a significant other that, or if you're a carer or something like that, you may be able to get certain dispensations to work in certain areas. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but it's worth looking into if that's something that's very important to you and sort of a make or break. So yeah, so I guess that really this part one of this talk is just to sort of tell you that the deciles, yes, they are the big determinants of your FPAS score, but there's so many other variables that have to do with whether or not you do well. You know, I have people who didn't do very well in their, you know, EPM score, and then they did really well on their SJT. So it can be helpful, it can be not helpful. There's a bit of a chance to it, I think. Your BSc seems to be important if you have done it. That's good, a few points. But again, really, the difference of a few points doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter where you do your foundation years. You will find opportunities elsewhere if you don't get into what you want. And if you have to move, you probably will be able to get somewhere close-ish. You know, very rarely do you have to really move very, very far. If location is important to you, you probably will get your top 3 or top 4. And they tend to be, for those who find a location very important, they tend to be close by to a certain extent. So that's FPAS. That's sort of initial part. So let us let's leave the questions to the end, actually, and then we'll sort of put it all in one go, and then we can discuss. Cool. So I think this is the real thing that I hope that for me I can give you a bit more of an understanding of. I think one problem with a lot of the people that you meet as a medical student is that they tend to be very, very junior foundation doctors who are obviously, you know, great, and they loads of very, very high achieving. But I think perhaps sometimes the foundation doctors are so caught up in what they're doing now. Perhaps sometimes maybe you need some slightly more senior doctors who have been, you know, working. I've been working for about 4 years now, yeah, and I sort of have an idea of how the progression works. Rather than just focusing on this sort of short-term few years, I kind of want to show you how things will work going forward so that you can think about how to plan your career and not worry about your deciles at the moment to develop your career going forward. So for me, just as what happened to me, so I ranked in the top 2% of internal medicine training. So there's top 60 out of 2,700 applicants. I was very lucky to get my top choice job. So my first year at St. George's and my second year will be at Guy's next year. So I'm very excited about that. And really, honestly, I can tell you it has nothing to do with my decile rank. And it had very, very little to do with any of that. And all of it was about me developing my skills early on clinically, and also academically, and also trying to think about how I can prepare for interviewing going forward and developing my skills in that direction. So I hope that that will give you some more inspiration, that it was all about you as a person and not what the number says about you. Okay. And I guess in that same vibe, I would say that if you have decided on a specialty or you want to do a particular specialty, have a look at the scoring criteria as soon as you can, as you need a few things sometimes to get things sorted for the competitive ones. And it doesn't matter if the research or audit is in a particular specialty, but certainly you can prepare. We will do a talk at some point about how to get into medical training, surgical training, and radiology and other stuff. So yeah, we'll do that in more detail later, what the scoring criteria is and stuff like that. So just for example, so medical training. If you look at the arrow, if you get a high achievement award for primary medical qualification, then you will get 6 points. Okay, but it's very important. This is for the shortlistings. This is for when you are applying earlier on. So let's say you are in the top honors or distinction, like in the top 10% of your finals, you get 6 points. And then if you get more than one prize, you get 4 points, which is fine. So keep that in mind. And then I'll talk about the rest of it, because it's very important how to categorize this as part of the whole application. So you have a application score, which is sent at the interview score. So the application score is your shortlisting, so that the points you get from whatever. So out of that, we saw earlier, you have 6 points, and then 6 out of 68, and then they multiply at 0.25 and 17. So you can see that the interview is so important. It's 80 points, and then the application score is actually 17 points, which is out of the initial 68. So if you do the maths, your total score is 97. If I was top decile in my finals, it will give me 1 extra definite point for my medical application, which is really tiny, actually, when you consider it. Of course, at the top here, you can see this is interview stuff. There's evidence. And in theory, would the interviews give you more points if you were, top of your year? Or would they dock you down if you don't? I don't think so, on a more subjective way. But certainly, so yeah, maybe there's other couple of maybe 2 or 3 points possibly. But certainly, from what we see here in the sort of objective sense, you will have 1 extra point out of 97 if you're applying for medical training. So actually, it doesn't matter that much. It's more about you in the interview. Equally for surgical training, this is just something I found online for someone who is giving some surgical application advice, and he said he worked in a top-ranked rotation in London as a core surgical trainee. He was an 8th decile, and he says, do not be put off by the point sheet, and notes it's worth medical school academic performance is worth a minority of points. A lot of it comes from the other stuff. So it can help you, give you a few more points here and there, but really it's about how you do holistically in interview, essentially. That's sort of what it boils down to. So it's about you as a person, and hopefully that will show you that actually if you work hard at it and you get your clinical confidence, you work and develop links with people, and you do some audits, you do some publications, it's really representation of your own efforts. And the person who gets into the most competitive jobs is not necessarily the one who is top of the year and has loads of publications. It's about them generally as an individual. So therefore, the person who might get into a very, very competitive specialty is maybe someone who has 1 publication maybe, or 2 publications in something relevant to the specialty, a couple of good audits, really, really good at interview, and very good clinical knowledge. And probably they would get into more specialties, to be honest with you. So that's the general thought process about not worrying too much about deciles in the long term. There's some of my friends who are very much sort of location. They wanted to stay in London but didn't for a foundation program. There is life outside of London, as they told me, and they really enjoyed it. But generally, they're the ones who really want to stay in London, and they wanted to stay, but they didn't do well for whatever reason, and then eventually they came back because they are excellent, all of them very, very good, excellent quality candidates. And then they came back to do CMT, gastroenterology, ACCS, CMT, cardiology. So really, very, very high quality people that maybe didn't do so well doing medical school for various reasons, and then eventually they found their way, and that they came back to the place that they live, so their families in London, for example. So it doesn't matter. Another friend of mine, very smart, 6th, 7th decile, and got neurosurgery straight out of F2. Amazing. He just did a good BSc, connected with neurosurgeons, ticked the boxes basically. And obviously, he was clinically very, very good, knew how to work in an interview and say the right things. So yeah, it doesn't matter that much. You can not do so well, and then just generally, work on yourself and get to where you want to be. So yeah, that is the general sort of summary of all that. So it can help in the short term, but it doesn't really have that much of an impact on your long-term career goals. Work on making yourself strong in all these different ways. And then if you are an excellent candidate, even if you're an excellent candidate at the end of CMT or whatever, and you want to move, you want to get a really difficult job, you still might have to move as well. So if location is important to you, you probably should think about the specialty you're applying to, because that may require you to move. So some people who live in London, for us at least, they had to go to Newcastle for surgical training. Some people had to go to Stoke, but all their families in London, for example, but they wanted to because they, it's very far away, but actually they wanted to because that was their, career. They wanted to do that training specialty. So yeah, think about it if you are willing to do so and willing to do that for your specialty. So in summary, deciles can possibly help you get into your chosen foundation program, depending on loads of factors. It can help, but not necessarily if you get other stuff right or other stuff goes wrong. It doesn't matter which foundation program you go to, the grand scheme of things. Lower decile scores can have very little effect on long-term specialty applications and your career trajectory. And if you look at your long-term goals, it's not worth all the stress. This is one of my favorite films, Cool Runnings. So yeah, I always tell people to make sure to back themselves and say to themselves, that they are good, and they are, there's pride, there's power, you need to make sure to back yourself in order to succeed. And don't worry if you have a bit of stumbling blocks along the way. Should be fine. At the end of the day, you'll get what you want, I'm sure, if you keep at it. Cool. So let's go through some questions, I think. Fine. So I think while we are, please do fill out the feedback. Okay, cool. So there's feedback. Brilliant. So people are answering, or what did people want to ask? Is there any difference in foundation program applications for international students at UK universities? No, there isn't. I think there may be some issues with visas you have to sort out, but there isn't any problem with international students, no. So can you go through the ranking process again? If I wanted to do foundation program in a London deanery, what would be the best way to maximize my chances? I would say that to maximize your chances, try and doing a BSc, as we saw, is useful, and also doing well if you can on your exams, but it's not that important for the long term, as we said, and also to what else is important? Trying to get some publications if you can, be useful. What are the jobs available in F1-2? Would we be able to do a specialized job like ENT opthal? Yes, it depends on the deanery. Some deaneries do not have ophthalmology, for example, or ENT, and it's much less likely that FY1 or FY2s will do things like ENT, because the jobs are not that many. But it's fine. If you can't do it, then it's okay. You can do it later in your training. Which university did I go to? I went to UCL in London. Do you get your SJT scores before ranking foundation schools? No, you don't, I think, from what I remember. No, you don't get your SJT scores before ranking foundation schools. How can I revise for the SJT? Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. what happens if you get accepted into your top choice deanery, but then change your mind? I don't think you can change your mind, from what I remember. I think you have to stick to it. Can you explain about letters from editor and PubMed ID? So if you get a publication, you need to get where did I go? Yeah, if you get a publication, it can be a letter to the editor, which is a short sort of 200, 300 word publication. And it has to be on PubMed, and certain journals will put them on PubMed, and they give you an ID, and that's the one that you input into the application, and they will give you the points only if the publication has a PubMed ID. When applying to specialty postgraduate training, do you apply nationally to all jobs in the UK, or how does it work? So I can only talk about medical training, but for us it was you apply to nationally, and you rank all the jobs. So you rank every single job if you want, and then you get whichever one you get, basically. It's not sort of based on foundation, but us on schools. How do you go about getting involved in audits? I think we covered that in a different lecture, so I'm not going to go through that, but we will talk about audits at some points. But certainly getting a supervisor is the first thing that you should do. Is there an interview for the foundation program application? No, there isn't. And then what else? Thank you, Yezen, you're very welcome. How do you go about finding new housemates and accommodation at deanery? I don't know. Usually people just start random Facebook groups on deanery and in like Northwest London foundation program, and then people just talk about it and then they sort it out. Does each deanery advertise a cutoff? Is there any info about different deaneries and people's experience in particular deaneries? I think there is one company called Messley that do sort of ratings, but I don't think they have it for everyone. I haven't seen it for a few years, so I wouldn't know. Does each deanery advertise a cutoff before application deadlines? No, they don't. So you find out about that later. Thanks for a great talk. On a similar vein, can not intercalating have any significant impact on specialty applications? I don't think not intercalating has a big impact on specialty applications, but it gives you a few more points, which is helpful. But I don't think, if you don't do it, I don't think it will have a significant impact. I think if you haven't done it, then it's important to try and buff up your CV in different ways. So maybe try and get publications and stuff. But apart from that, I wouldn't worry about it too much. And then what else are we doing? So SJT, I'm not going to talk about, sorry. Next talk, join us on Facebook and we'll tell you about the next talks. Any PEDS jobs out there doing foundation years? Yeah, there are loads of people do PEDS. So there's loads of PEDS jobs. I'm sure you will be able to get lots of PEDS jobs if you want. What does a taster week involve? Taster week is when you, what do you call it? Is when you can get a week off of foundation program training and then just do a week in whatever you want, which they do. Sometimes you can do it in F1, sometimes you can do it F2, depending on the deanery. I did mine in F1, and I just took a week off and went to neurology clinics and joined consultants, which was great. So how am I supposed to rank deaneries without knowing my SJT score? Yeah, exactly. It's tricky. It's tricky business. So you can't really play the game so much. You sort of find out all in one go. And it can be scary. How many graduates do not get an FY job after medical school every year? What would be individuals' next steps if they fall into this category? Very, very, very little people do not get F1 jobs after medical school. I think that's fair for me to say. I don't know what happens if they don't, but it's very, very rare. I wouldn't I don't even know. Is it easier for those from London unis to stay in London? I think lots of the London unis do BScs, or you have to do a BSc. So therefore, on that alone, I would say probably their scores might be higher than those who are not. But yeah, that's the only thing that I would change. I don't think there's that much difference. I don't know if it's a more competitive environment. I can only talk about my own medical school. We were really competitive. Yeah, I think BScs probably have a big role to it. Where do you find what jobs deaneries provide? I don't think they advertise them. I think I found it by asking a friend of mine who was the year above and who was in an F1, and I asked him to send me his list of deaneries and stuff. I don't think they advertise it. The foundation program application form, I'm not sure exactly where it is. It's on, I found it online. If you just Google foundation program applications, there will be lots of stuff and they can tell you. It's not a form. It's like an online application thing. So it's not an actual form, like a paper thing you fill out. Okay, talked about that. Special circumstances, being near a hospital you are seeking treatment from, I would always discuss with your medical school, and they can help you sort out which hospitals would be better for you, and they can discuss with the foundation schools and they can help you sort that out. Definitely easy enough to sort out if you involve the right people. Once you're into IMT, what is the application process like for higher training? It's quite similar to IMT actually. It's just sort of different benchmarks, but it's essentially the same. You do interviews, but it depends on the specialty. And it's mainly based on interview as well. If you don't get your first choice for F1, how low down on your list can you usually get? How likely are you to get second or third choice, or more likely ninth or 10th choice? More likely actually second or third choice, to be honest, from at least my own experience and my friends. Yeah, most people would get, the first few choices. Very, very rarely would they get really, really far away. I think only out of my cohort of friends, only one person ended up going relatively far, which is Birmingham, and he lives in London. But apart from that, most people got the second or third. Do you get obs and gynae jobs in foundation? Yes, you get loads. So loads of F1 foundation jobs. Which deaneries have neurology jobs? North Central London do not have neurology jobs, as far as I remember. They have stroke. They might change, but I don't think it has. South Thames has neurology jobs in Kingston, and Northwest London have neurology jobs in Chelsea and Westminster. East London, I can't remember, is the honest answer. But there will be some neurology jobs across the country as well. Fine. And then, so we answered some more. Is a golden triangle stronger in research and worth competing for? I don't know what the golden triangle is. Is that Oxford and Cambridge and London? I don't know what the golden triangle is. But yeah, I don't think it matters in your foundation years where you do your research. It doesn't matter. Just do some research. That's it. If you're unsure what specialty you want to integrate in something like medical education, does that affect your chance of getting to specialty? No. Medical education, which we will do a talk about at some point, is useful for everything. So if you do anything in medical education, like research or teaching or whatever, it will be useful for every single specialty. So do loads of medical education stuff and join Savannah's stuff as well for Study Hub, as she has pointed out as well. So yeah, definitely good for your CV. Oh, so good for your CV. No, but generally it really, really is. So do it. And then, we'll tell you more about it in another lecture. Does it matter what your BSc is in? I did mine in something very non-medical before I started George's. Definitely does not matter, because lots of integrated BScs are sort of slightly non-medical as well. So it's fine. Doesn't matter, as long as you show that you have done something. How many choices can you put down on the foundation program application form? I think you just rank them. You don't put choices down. How do you choose jobs when you're not sure what you want to do in the future? That's the beauty of the foundation program. It's very general, so you don't need to choose the jobs that you want. You just sort of do, a mix of stuff that you feel is a bit interesting, and then you do it, and then you finish your foundation program. And if you're not sure, you can, take a year out, figure it out, and then go for there. So it's a nice bit of foundation. The best thing of foundation program. Fine. The foundation application doesn't ask us. Can you say what else the foundation program application asks us, i.e. evidence of teaching? It doesn't, as far as I remember. Right, more questions. Do you have any advice specific to students doing graduate entry in medicine? I would say for graduate entry medicine, I don't know because I'm not a graduate. However, lots of my colleagues have done really well in specialties who are grads. Any insight how we talk about previous careers in interviews? So the interviews are really specific about certain things, and they will ask you about it. And if you want to talk about other things, you can. But this is sort of beyond the topic, to be honest. I think we'll have to talk about it another time, I'm afraid. But we can certainly mention it at another time. But certainly the interviews are so short that sometimes you just have to talk about what's in front of you. So and your sort of more recent experience. How do you organize an F3? Is it like the foundation program application? No, the F3 is a year out that you take after your foundation program, which doctors have come to call it as the F3 as a joke, but actually it's just a year out. Fine. How do I find the competition ratio for all the theories? Different reports say different things. I don't know if they actually publish them, to be honest. I haven't found them. I couldn't find them. If you want to do a teaching fellow job, is your deciles taken into consideration? No, they will not. Nobody cares about your deciles. Honestly, when you're applying for jobs, no one's going to ask you about your deciles. It really doesn't matter. It's all about your CV. It's all about you, how you do an interview, etc., etc. Once you have been allocated a deanery, is that when you choose your job? Do you rank these jobs too? Yes. So once you get allocated deanery, then you choose the jobs, and then you rank the jobs, and then you get that based on your ranking. And then you know about them. For me, I think it was around April, something like that, May. Can't remember exactly when. So that's when you find out. And then what is a letter? A letter to the editor is a 200, 300 words, small piece of research or discussion about certain things that you can submit to an article. And that is a letter to the editor. Can you be allocated to more than one deanery? No, you get allocated to one deanery. That's it. And then how many graduates do not get an F1 job after medical school every year? Yeah, so we answered that question before. Fine. How many letters? I think you put two. You can do two letters to the editor. I think that should be fine. If I did not do well for BSc, does that put me at a disadvantage? Or what point is that? So I think, what was it we looked at earlier? It was 4 points for a first class, and then it's 2 points for 2-2. So actually it doesn't matter that much, to be honest. Again, one particular aspect of your application, one particular aspect of your application is not so important in the grand scheme of things. It's all about how you put it all together. So if you don't do well in one bit, then doing well in other bits usually are good enough to get you into most things you want to do. When are you told that what deanery you've been successful applying to? I think you get told that earlier on, maybe February, March. I can't remember. It's honest answer, but maybe check the foundation school program application website. What point can you be a CTF? How do you become a CTF? So is that a clinical teaching fellow, or is that that is a clinical teaching fellow, I think, CTF. Yeah, or ACF. No, CTF. So CTF is, you can do that after F2 or after CT2. So whenever, really, after you finish your foundation program, depending on the medical school or the university or the hospital that wants to hire you. For AFP, do you say, let's say you want to do the research one as opposed to teaching or leadership, and which specialty is your research in? Does that mean you just set up in whatever department you want? Yeah, kind of. You just sort of, I mean, I haven't done the AFP, I don't know, but for my friends, they sort of just do, you sort of just pick whichever department to a certain extent that runs in the same theme as your chosen specialty in the AFP, and you can just pick the supervisor and then you discuss stuff with them and then you sort it out from there. I don't know exactly how it works, but that's what happens. And it also happened with lots of my friends who just sort of found their supervisor they wanted and they worked with them and had some vague relation sometimes to their chosen area of research. Is having extra skills, multiple languages, extra qualifications to be considered for FP application interview? No. So it's a very strict thing, foundation. You know, it's only the EPM, the SJT, and the score. It's really sort of, yeah, it's quite arbitrary. It really does reduce you to a number, and it's a shame because everyone is great. Some people said to put London as my first choice, even if I don't think I'll get it, as I'll still be placed in the deanery I score for, regardless of whether I put it first or fifth. Yeah, you might as well. Yeah. So, you know, pick your top choice, whatever it may be, even if you don't think you'll get it. If you don't get it, you'll just go down to the other ones. So, yeah, definitely get it. Cool. So please fill out the feedback form. I do like these career tutorials because it gives me a chance to reflect on my own knowledge. Not my own knowledge, my own sort of progress, but also try and give back to people who are in the same position I was a few years back. So please come to all our tutorials going forward, career-wise, and lots of SBA tutorials coming up. So thank you so much for coming. Is there anything else people want to ask? Please feel free to. Anything you want to add, Savannah?
No, just while we're waiting on any more last questions, if anyone wants to, to keep up to date with all of our events, both Study Hub and QuesMed, a lot of the events that we do in collaboration with QuesMed, we advertise on both platforms. So feel free to join those Facebook pages. I'll just put the links in. I think that's the right there. Yeah, and all of the recordings are posted on the QuesMed tutorials Facebook page as well. So make sure you join their page. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Thanks very much for coming. Yeah, I really enjoyed that, and thanks. Hopefully it was useful for you guys going forward. Yeah, just back yourself. Just don't worry about numbers. It's all about you. That's all I have to say.